Forget about art versus the artist. Today we're talking about the general audience versus reviews, fans versus critics, and it does bring to mind the complex relationship of experiences, faculties, knowledge, and personality, which interact with the external work, in this case a piece of interactive entertainment, and the result is an opinion based off of subjective engagement. A solid 6 from one critic could be someone else's favorite game, an underrated gem, which with enough time and influence will be retrospectively acknowledged as a classic. Again, the work itself has not changed, but the culture has, and similarly, once celebrated classics become dated curios. In short, there is no objectivity, but a shifting landscape of windows and mirrors that spiral forth the human consciousness. Anyway, let's talk about video games. Have you ever seen a game get a middling score upon release only to find yourself thrilled, surprised, and shocked at how much better it was by your experience? We all have. It can be quite strange to feel the collective reviews don't appreciate the same qualities you do. So this week on Gamer Said, we asked, name a game you enjoyed despite its reviews, and you answered. So let's break it down. We got many different answers, but there's one clear winner above the rest of the pack, and it's a PlayStation 4 exclusive oddball that is rumored to be getting a new remaster. Of course, we're talking about 2019's Days Gone, which got name-checked again and again and again. Let's start with Jock. Quote, Days Gone, an excellent game. I played 220 hours of it over the years. On a more recent game, Star Wars Outlaws really hasn't deserved all the hate and bad reviews it has received. I love this game. It's a lot of fun, and as a big Star Wars fan, some great Star Wars universe links and Easter eggs, it has already given me 60 plus hours of highly enjoyable gameplay. And surprisingly, that's not the only time we saw Days Gone and Star Wars Outlaws in the same answer, such as Christopher, who said, quote, a game that immediately comes to mind is Star Wars Outlaws. It didn't get terrible reviews, but I think it's better than most critics give it credit for. Days Gone for sure. And then Death Stranding, which sits atop my best games of the decade, was a masterpiece as far as I am concerned. And lastly, for Days Gone, we've selected this passionate and lengthy response from Pablo, who summarized what so many loved about Days Gone. Quote, I must chime in. Amazing game. Definitely my favorite now. I purchased the PS5 about 5 months ago, and I got the PlayStation Network Plus, where Days Gone was available. The first thing I noticed was the awesome motorcycle riding in the free world. That alone is tons of fun. Anyway, the story was great. I actually felt for him when Sarah dissed him when they first reunited. At the same time, that was a great twist. The hordes. That was the best action I played in any game. The first go-around was tough, as my weapons and my lifeline was weak. My second playthrough I destroyed as everything was in steroid mode. Playing Ultimate Survival Mode for the second time, and the game for the 5th time. It's such a long game that I'm still excited when the storyline moves to the next chapter. The second half of the game is definitely the best, especially taking out the hordes. For me personally, Days Gone takes the lead. End quote. Again, this wasn't planned, but if the rumors of a Days Gone remaster are true, it's going to be a great day for these players. But there is something to those original reviews, which played on the PlayStation 4's stuttering sub 30 frames per second while weaving around on a motorcycle. But on the PlayStation 5, the game performs much better, with 60 frames per second, and gave the game a real chance to shine, as did the PC version. Up next, we have Tommy, who says, quote, Death Stranding, still my all-time favorite game. Batman Arkham Origins, wish I still had my PS3 so I could play it at Christmas. And Cyberpunk 2077, completely panned when it was released. With a few fixes, it became one of the best games ever. End quote. Good list, Tommy, though I'll say Cyberpunk 2077 took more than a few fixes to get into ship shape, but one of the best games of all time, I wholeheartedly agree. Death Stranding also got quite a few name checks, though it's worth noting the game reviewed relatively well. But Tommy nailed another common point with Batman Arkham Origins. The forgotten game in the Arkham series was developed by WB Games Montreal rather than Rocksteady, and has never seen a re-release despite the growing, if slight, demand. In fact, one of our most popular responses this week was from Aiden, who just said Batman Arkham Origins. And Raheel agreed, saying Marvel Avengers, Batman Arkham Origins. And Raheel, you're getting this week's official hot take, a thing I just made up because Marvel's Avengers wasn't what I expected to see, as fans and critics trashed the game for its live service and limited content. But that's why I respect the answer, Raheel. Every game can be appreciated. India touched on one of our favorites, quote, Watch Dogs Legion. I really love to play as anyone mechanic. I might be slightly biased because I used to live in London. Well, India, from one person who's never been to London, Watch Dogs Legion rules. If Cyberpunk 2077 is Grand Theft Auto, Watch Dogs Legion is Saints Row. And speaking of Saints Row, Jamie gave a shout out to the much derided reboot, quote, Saints Row 2022. It's most certainly not perfect, and some of the criticisms regarding performance are valid, but it was a good game to mess around in. The story's fine enough, it has some good parts, and the general gameplay, whilst basic, is decent enough to mindlessly engage with. It's like a 6 out of 10, but it doesn't feel like it's trying to be anything more than something to enjoy and then move on from. And John agrees, quote, Saints Row reboot. It was stupid mindless fun and days gone, end quote. I really couldn't believe my eyes. As someone who played the Saints Row reboot, I simply did not care for the general vibe it was going for. These answers seem to be meeting the game on its level. Simple enjoyment of a video game. No more, no less. Some have labeled Saints Row as generic, and this is really a subject that broke through, because a generic game really speaks to the familiarity of its presentation and mechanics. Clearly, a less original work carries less merit, right? Well, guess again. As the audience is smart to annualized franchises and shared features, they're fine with familiar issues, so long as the game improves. After all, it's fun to relax and kick back with a game. Like Tyler says, Far Cry 6, despite people saying the formula is getting old, I say it's still got some charm. It's got a big map to explore, and there's a lot of stuff to do. Plus, it has a better variety of weapons than Far Cry 5 and Far Cry New Dawn. John also chimed in, it was the best Far Cry yet. That's right, I said it. End quote. And yeah, the graphics are better, the controls are better, the maps are more interesting, the story is well done, and yes, it's everything you've done before, but I concur. Best Far Cry 6, agreed. Except Primal. However, others didn't agree. Williams said, quote, yeah, that's one of Ubisoft's problems. They have two main franchises, Far Cry and Assassin's Creed, and honestly, if you played either one of them, you basically played them all. It worked for a long time. But I think the two franchises' time is coming to a close. Just my honest opinion about them. And one final comment from an anonymous user agreed with William, saying, I second William 100%. My first AC game was Black Flag, which was bad because I started with arguably the best one. For years, I had no idea at all that different studios were making the releases. I thought they were just reusing the same game engine, the generic series format for gameplay, story, and the AC mechanics to tell different stories. And that is how they were able to put out one per year. I've never been more irritated by the main story of a game either. I don't think I'll download another AC even on Game Pass until I hear they've made changes and innovations that have upset their die-hard players because it's so different. Because if it isn't, I've already been there and done that. End quote. And there you have it, folks, the divide between two groups who have extensive opinions on the same games, who have clearly both experienced and played the same games, and given them both great consideration, but their conclusions are going in completely opposite directions. It's all one and the same in a world of windows and mirrors. It's all perspective, which means it's all true. All right, let's do the quickfire round before we close the show. We've got Agent Silent One saying Mad Max. Joshua says Marvel Midnight Suns reviews made it sound meh, but I loved it. Big agree to Joshua from Mike. Quote, Marvel's Midnight Suns. Don't know how the ratings are, but I do know it didn't sell well enough for a sequel, even after setting up an epic post-credits scene. Love this one. Played it for 6 months straight. End quote. I'll just say it. Maybe the best Marvel game this generation. Oh, hot take. Matthew says Atlas Fallen. Have thoroughly enjoyed this game. Was hesitant to buy because of the reviews. Turned into one of my favorites. End quote. Again, a game that certainly borrows from more than it creates, but when you're kicking back on the sofa, who cares? It's all about having a good time. SOCOM says Alien Colonial Marines. You're crazy for this one, SOCOM, but we love it. Gregory says Anthem. Another scorcher of a hot take, and we say keep them coming. And lastly is James, who says, I see a lot of comments, but let's talk about the elephant in the room. Suicide Squad. Yeah, it didn't do the best, but for what it was worth, I enjoyed the game overall solo and co-op. End quote. Again, this wouldn't be on my personal list. There are some people who enjoy Rocksteady's latest game, in which you murder Batman, among other devious acts. But we say live your truth and always bring it in the comments. We want to thank everyone who gave us answers, and hope you all had fun discussing critics and fans, and how they're related. Chances are, no matter where we go in the future, there's always going to be a lovely little game that didn't get the credit it quite deserved, which is why it's so important to spread the word. But anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of Gamers Said. We'll see you next week, and keep giving us those answers.